Welcome to the Cartoon Codex. Today, we're doing something ambitious. We're talking about every major character in South Park, the show that's been pushing boundaries and making people laugh for over 25 years now. This isn't going to be your typical quick rundown. We're going deep into the fictional Colorado town that's become one of the most important pieces of animated television ever created. South Park premiered on Comedy Central back in August of 1997, and from the very beginning, it was clear this wasn't going to be your average cartoon. Created by Trey Parker and Matt Stone, two guys who met at the University of Colorado and bonded over their shared love of Monty Python. The show started as a crude stop-motion animation using construction paper cutouts, and what began as a video Christmas card evolved into a cultural phenomenon that would run for decades and spawn movies, video games, and endless controversy. The show centers around four boys living in the small mountain town of South Park, Colorado. Located in the Rocky Mountains, about an hour from Denver. The town itself is based on the real South Park Basin and draws inspiration from Fairplay, Colorado. But what makes South Park special isn't just the setting or the crude animation style that they've maintained throughout the years. It's the characters. The show has created one of the most diverse and memorable casts in television history, from the main kids to their dysfunctional parents, incompetent teachers, and the parade of celebrities and historical figures who get skewered week after week. The brilliance of South Park's characters lies in how they've evolved. What started as simple archetypes, four foul-mouthed kids getting into trouble, has become something much more complex. Characters have grown, changed, died, come back to life, changed genders, become presidents, and gone through more character development than most live-action dramas manage in their entire runs. And somehow, Parker and Stone do this while maintaining a production schedule that sees them writing, animating, and producing episodes in just 6 days, allowing them to comment on current events with a speed no other show can match. The cast of South Park has expanded far beyond those original four boys. There's the parents dealing with their own midlife crises and obsessions, the school staff who are somehow even more dysfunctional than their students, and an entire town full of characters who've become iconic in their own right. From Randy Marsh's descent into marijuana farming to Mr. Garrison's journey through gender identity, and eventually becoming president, the show has never been afraid to take its characters to unexpected places. What we're going to do here is break down every major character in the South Park universe. We'll talk about their origins, how they've changed over the years, their relationships with other characters, and what makes them work as comedic creations. We'll look at the core four boys who started it all, the parents who've sometimes stolen the spotlight, the supporting cast that's grown into something essential, and even some of the one-off characters who've made lasting impacts on the show's mythology. This is going to be thorough, because South Park deserves thorough. After more than 300 episodes across 27 seasons, plus movies and specials, there's a lot of ground to cover. These characters have become part of our cultural lexicon. When someone says, "Oh my God, they killed Kenny," everyone knows what that means. When someone mentions getting their authority respected, we all know they're channeling Cartman. These aren't just cartoon characters anymore. They're cultural touchstones. So let's start at the beginning, with the four boys who started it all. The kids who were supposed to just be background characters in a crude animated short, and somehow became some of the most recognizable figures in television history. Stan Marsh, the Everyman who grew up too fast. Stanley Randall Marsh, better known as just Stan, is probably the closest thing South Park has to a traditional protagonist. He's the everyman, the normal kid, the one who's supposed to represent what an average American boy might be like if you stripped away all the politeness and let him actually say what kids really think. Stan was loosely based on Trey Parker himself, sharing many biographical details with the show's co-creator, and Parker provides his voice throughout the series. When we first meet Stan, he's living at 260 Avenue de los Mexicanos in South Park, with his parents Randy and Sharon, his older sister Shelley, and his grandfather Marvin. He's just a regular third grader trying to navigate childhood in a town where insane things happen on a weekly basis. You can spot Stan by his brown jacket with a red collar, blue hat with a red puffball on top, and his general expression of mild confusion at the chaos around him. What makes Stan work as a character is that he's relatable in a way the other boys aren't. He's not as angry as Kyle, not as evil as Cartman, and not as mysterious as Kenny. Stan is the kid who just wants things to make sense, who tries to do the right thing most of the time, and who often ends up being the voice of reason when everyone else has lost their minds. In early seasons, Stan was frequently the one delivering the, I learned something today speeches that closed out episodes, literally explaining the moral of the story directly to the audience. But here's what's interesting about Stan. As the show has progressed, he's become less of a wide-eyed innocent and more of a cynical, world-weary character who's seen too much. And this evolution really crystallized in the season 15 episode, You're Getting Old, where Stan turns 10 and suddenly everything looks and sounds like literal garbage to him. The metaphor was obvious. Stan was experiencing depression and disillusionment, seeing through the facade of childhood happiness to the disappointing reality underneath. That episode marked a turning point for Stan's character. Before that, he was the optimist, the kid who believed things could get better. After that, he became more jaded, more aware of how messed up everything is, and less willing to pretend otherwise. This made sense from a meta perspective too. Parker and Stone were getting older, dealing with the realities of being successful adults, and those feelings bled into their avatar character. As Stan's relationship with his father Randy has become increasingly strained over the years. In the early seasons, Randy was just an occasional background character, the dorky dad who showed up for parent-teacher conferences. But as Randy's role expanded and his behavior became more erratic and self-centered, Stan found himself embarrassed and frustrated by his father's antics. The tension really exploded when Randy moved the family to Tegrity Farms in season 22, uprooting Stan's entire life to pursue his marijuana farming dream. From that point forward, Stan lived on a farm in the countryside instead of in the town, separating him physically from his friends and the community. The show dealt with this by having most episodes still take place at school or in town, but the change represented how Stan's childhood was being disrupted by his father's midlife crisis. Eventually, in season 27, Randy sells the farm and the family moves back, but those years showed how much Stan's home life has been defined by dealing with Randy's increasingly chaotic behavior. Stan's friendship with Kyle Broflovsky is the emotional core of the show. Parker and Stone have said repeatedly that their relationship is meant to mirror the real-life friendship between the creators themselves, with Stan as Parker and Kyle as Stone. The two boys have a bond that goes beyond normal friendship. They're super best friends, a term that gets used throughout the series to indicate how deep their connection goes. They finish each other's sentences, they defend each other against bullies, and they're the moral center that keeps each other grounded. This friendship has been tested repeatedly throughout the series. There was the separation when Randy moved to Tegrity Farms. There was the COVID-19 pandemic storyline, where their friendship became strained by distance and differing opinions. In the post-COVID specials set decades in the future, we see that Stan and Kyle had some kind of falling out and haven't spoken in years, showing how even the strongest friendships can break under the right circumstances. But the show always comes back to the idea that their friendship is essential to both of them, even if they don't always see it. Stan's relationship with Wendy Testerberger has been an ongoing subplot throughout the series. Wendy is Stan's on-again, off-again girlfriend, and their relationship has all the awkwardness and drama you'd expect from elementary school romance. Stan famously throws up whenever Wendy talks to him in early seasons, a physical manifestation of how nervous she makes him. They've broken up and gotten back together countless times, dealt with jealousy, with Stan's inattention, and with Wendy's frustration at Stan's immaturity. What's interesting is how Wendy is often portrayed as more mature and politically aware than Stan, which creates friction. She's out organizing protests and taking stands on issues, while Stan is just trying to get through the day. This dynamic has made their relationship one of the more realistic portrayals of young romance in animation, showing how two people can care about each other but not quite be on the same page about what they want from life. Stan's interactions with Cartman are complex. Unlike Kyle, who has a clear adversarial relationship with Cartman, Stan occupies a weird middle ground. He knows Cartman is terrible. He's seen Cartman do unspeakable things. But Stan also sometimes goes along with Cartman's schemes, either out of boredom or curiosity, or because Cartman's plans occasionally sound interesting. Stan doesn't hate Cartman the way Kyle does, but he doesn't really like him either. It's more like Cartman is just a fact of life, someone Stan has to deal with because they're in the same friend group. The show has explored Stan's psyche in interesting ways over the years. We've seen him struggle with depression in You're Getting Old. We've seen him develop cynicism about the world around him. We've seen him question authority, challenge his father, and slowly realize that adults don't have all the answers. This gradual loss of innocence has been one of the more subtle but effective character arcs in the show. Stan's character really shines when he's dealing with moral dilemmas. Episodes like Whale Whores, where Stan joins the Sea Shepherd to save dolphins and whales, show his idealistic side. Episodes like Aspen, where he has to overcome his fear to stand up to a bully, show his growth. Stan is at his best when he's fighting for something he believes in, even if he's not always sure what that is. There's also Stan's role as the audience surrogate. Because he's the most normal of the group, we often experience South Park's insanity through Stan's eyes. His reactions to the crazy events around him mirror how we'd react. When he's confused, we're confused. When he's appalled, we're appalled. This makes him an effective vehicle for commentary, because his responses feel authentic. One of Stan's most interesting characteristics is his leadership role among the boys. While they don't have an official hierarchy, Stan often ends up being the one making decisions or suggesting plans. He's the one who organizes their adventures, who tries to keep everyone on track, who mediates when conflicts arise. This leadership isn't about being bossy or domineering. It's more about Stan being the most sensible option in a group that includes a psychopath, a kid who dies constantly, and Kyle, who's smart, but can be too rigid in his thinking. Stan's appearance has remained remarkably consistent throughout the show's run. The brown jacket, blue hat, and general look have stayed the same, which is interesting given how much other characters have changed. This consistency reinforces his role as the stable center around which other characters orbit. While everyone else goes through dramatic transformations, Stan remains recognizably himself. In the video games The Stick of Truth and The Fractured But Whole, Stan plays a significant role as one of the main characters players interact with. His portrayal in these games reinforces his position as one of the core four, someone essential to any adventure in South Park. The games also show his versatility as a character, able to fit into fantasy or superhero scenarios with equal ease. Stan represents something important in South Park's universe. He's the kid who hasn't given up completely, who still thinks things might get better even when all evidence suggests otherwise. He's been beaten down by his father's behavior, by his town's insanity, by the general chaos of existence, but he keeps showing up and trying to make sense of it all. That persistence in the face of absurdity is what makes Stan Marsh work as a character. He's us, trying to understand a world that makes less sense every day. Kyle Broflovsky. The moral center with a temper. Kyle Broflovsky stands out in South Park for one immediate and unavoidable reason. He's Jewish. In a town where he's one of the few Jewish residents, Kyle's religious and cultural identity has been a defining characteristic from day one. He wears a green ushanka with ear flaps, has curly red hair underneath, and dresses in an orange jacket. But what really defines Kyle isn't his appearance. It's his role as the show's conscience and the kid who believes in right and wrong, even when the world keeps proving how complicated those concepts really are. Kyle was modeled after Matt Stone, South Park's co-creator, who is also Jewish. Stone provides Kyle's voice and has infused the character with his own experiences and perspectives. Like Stone, Kyle represents the outsider's view, someone who sees the absurdity and hypocrisy in society because he's not fully part of the mainstream. This position gives Kyle a unique perspective that the show uses to great effect. In the early seasons, Kyle's personality was very similar to Stan's. He was the good kid, the one who tried to do right, the one who delivered moral lessons. But after the creators abandoned plans to kill Kyle off in Season 5, that honor went to Kenny instead. They decided to differentiate him more from Stan. Kyle became more hot-headed, more prone to anger, more willing to fight for what he believed in even when it made things worse. His temper shortened considerably, especially when it comes to Cartman. The relationship between Kyle and Eric Cartman is the most important dynamic in South Park. These two hate each other with a passion that goes beyond normal childhood rivalry. Cartman's anti-Semitism and Kyle's Jewish identity create constant friction, but it goes deeper than that. Kyle represents everything Cartman despises: morality, intelligence, principles, caring about others. Cartman represents everything Kyle fights against: cruelty, selfishness, bigotry, manipulation. Their battles have been epic. Cartman has tried to exterminate Kyle and all Jews multiple times. Kyle has exposed Cartman's schemes and brought him down. They've made bets that resulted in one having to be the other's slave. They've fought physically, emotionally, and intellectually, and yet they can't seem to stay away from each other. They're locked in this eternal struggle, where each defines himself partly in opposition to the other. What makes this dynamic work is that both characters get wins. Cartman isn't just a punching bag for Kyle's righteousness, and Kyle isn't just a victim of Cartman's schemes. Sometimes Cartman succeeds in tormenting Kyle to the point of breakdown. Sometimes Kyle outsmarts Cartman and exposes him for the monster he is. The balance keeps their relationship interesting, even after hundreds of episodes. Kyle lives with his parents, Gerald and Sheila Broflovsky, and his adopted Canadian brother, Ike. His mother, Sheila, is overprotective to an absurd degree, at becoming the archetypical helicopter parent who tries to shield her children from anything she deems harmful. This has caused major problems throughout the series, like when she led the campaign against Terrence and Philip in the movie, ultimately leading to war with Canada. Kyle has had to push back against his mother's overprotectiveness, while also dealing with his father Gerald's own issues, which have included trolling people online and causing international incidents. Kyle's relationship with his little brother Ike is genuinely sweet, one of the few purely positive relationships in the show. Kyle protects Ike, plays with him, and clearly loves him deeply. This shows Kyle's capacity for unconditional love and loyalty. When he found out Ike was adopted from Canada, his first instinct was to protect Ike from being taken away. The kick the baby running gag, where Kyle playfully kicks Ike like a football, is one of the show's most enduring bits, showing their affectionate sibling dynamic. Kyle's intelligence is another key characteristic. He's smart, probably the smartest of the main four boys. He thinks things through, considers consequences, and tries to understand complex issues. This intelligence makes him effective when he's fighting against injustice or solving problems, but it also makes him frustrated when others don't see what's obvious to him. His tendency to overthink things can be a weakness, leading to him getting manipulated by people who play on his need to be right or moral. The show has explored Kyle's Jewish identity in many ways. We've seen his family celebrate Hanukkah. We've dealt with his struggles being the token Jew in South Park. We've watched him defend his faith against mockery and attacks. But the show has also used Kyle's Judaism to examine larger themes about identity, belonging, and what it means to be different in a conformist society. Kyle's Jewishness isn't just a character trait. It's a lens through which the show examines prejudice and otherness. Kyle's sense of justice is both his greatest strength and his biggest flaw. He can't let things go when he sees something wrong. He has to fight, has to argue, has to try to fix it. This has led to him taking on causes that are bigger than he can handle, getting frustrated when people don't listen to reason, and sometimes making situations worse in his attempts to make them better. His inability to accept injustice means he's constantly stressed, constantly fighting, constantly being disappointed by humanity. And what's interesting is how Kyle's moral certainty has been challenged as the show has progressed. Early Kyle was pretty sure about right and wrong. Later, Kyle has had to confront situations where the moral choice isn't clear, where trying to do good leads to bad outcomes, where his principles conflict with reality. This has added depth to his character, showing how someone with strong beliefs adapts when those beliefs get tested. Kyle's friendship with Stan is his anchor. When everything else is chaos, when Cartman is being Cartman, when his parents are embarrassing him, Kyle has Stan. Their super best friend relationship is played both straight and for comedy, but it's clearly the most important relationship in Kyle's life. The few times they've seriously fought or drifted apart, Kyle has been noticeably lost without that connection, and Kyle's voice, provided by Matt Stone doing a slightly higher pitch than his normal speaking voice, has become iconic. The way Kyle yells Cartman in frustration has been imitated countless times. His tendency to go on passionate speeches about morality and justice has become a defining trait, and his famous line, "Respect my mom," yelled while beating up Cartman in defense of his mother, has become a meme in its own right. In episodes where Kyle gets to be the focus, we often see him dealing with dilemmas about identity and belief. Mr. Hanky the Christmas Pooh dealt with his feeling left out during Christmas season. Passion of the Jew had him confront his complicated feelings about Mel Gibson and the Passion of the Christ. Tonsil trouble put him in the position of having to save Cartman's life despite their mutual hatred, and these episodes explore what it means to be Kyle, to be Jewish, to be moral in an immoral world. Kyle's character development has been subtle but significant. He's gone from being essentially identical to Stan to having his own distinct personality and role. He's become more combative, more prone to anger, but also more nuanced in his understanding of the world. The easy answers of childhood have given way to the complicated realities of growing up, even if that growing up is happening in suspended animation, where he's been in the 4th grade for over 25 years. The Jersey Shore storyline, where it's revealed Kyle has connections to New Jersey through his family, added another layer to his character. It showed that even Kyle, who seems so defined by his South Park Jewish identity, has other backgrounds and influences, and the image of Kyle transforming into his Jersey persona, complete with aggressive attitude and Snooki-like behavior, was both hilarious and revealing about how we all contain multitudes. Kyle's role as moral center doesn't mean he's always right. The show has been careful to show Kyle making mistakes, being hypocritical, letting his emotions override his judgment. This keeps him from becoming a boring Mary Sue character. Kyle can be petty, can hold grudges, can let his hatred of Cartman push him into doing questionable things. He's principled, but he's not perfect. What makes Kyle work as a character is his persistence. Despite endless disappointments, despite Cartman's constant attacks, despite the world repeatedly showing him that people are terrible, Kyle keeps believing things should be better. He keeps fighting for what's right even when it's futile. That stubbornness, that refusal to give up on his principles, makes Kyle Broflovsky one of South Park's most essential characters. He's the conscience the show keeps trying to drown out, but can never quite silence. Eric Cartman, the monster who became the star. Eric Theodore Cartman is probably the most famous character in South Park, and for good reason. He's one of the most complex, disturbing, and darkly hilarious creations in television history. What started as a bratty, racist kid has evolved into something much more sinister. A genuinely psychopathic character whose evil schemes and complete lack of empathy have become the engine driving many of the show's most memorable episodes. You can't miss Cartman. He's the fat kid wearing a red jacket, yellow gloves, arson aqua blue hat with a yellow puffball on top, and brown pants. He has a double chin, medium brown hair, and is drawn to emphasize his obesity. The show has never been subtle about Cartman's weight, and neither has Cartman himself, even though he's deeply insecure about it and reacts with rage when anyone points it out. Trey Parker voices Cartman, giving him that distinctive whiny, entitled tone that's become iconic. Cartman's speech patterns, his exclamations of "respect my authority" and "screw you guys, I'm going home," have entered the cultural lexicon. His way of stretching out words when he's being manipulative, his sudden shifts from sweet to vicious, and his ability to sound simultaneously childish and calculating make him one of the most distinctive voices in animation. And what makes Cartman truly disturbing is that he started as a fairly normal character and has gotten progressively worse with each season. In early episodes, he was just the mean kid, the bully, the one who said inappropriate things. But as the show progressed, the creators kept pushing Cartman further into darkness. He's committed multiple murders, He's manipulated and destroyed lives. He's attempted genocide against Jews, hippies, and other groups he dislikes. He's fed someone their own parents in Chile. He's done things that would get him life in prison or psychiatric commitment if the show operated under normal rules. The genius of Cartman's character is that despite being an absolute monster, he's also hilarious. Parker and Stone have figured out how to make evil funny by making Cartman so over the top, so committed to his schemes, and so prone to elaborate planning that you can't help but be impressed, even as you're appalled. His plots are often brilliant in their conception, even if they're horrifying in their execution. Cartman's backstory explains some of his issues, though it doesn't excuse any of his behavior. He lives alone with his mother Leanne, who is possibly the worst parent in South Park. Leanne is permissive to the point of negligence, giving Cartman whatever he wants, defending his worst behavior, and generally enabling every terrible impulse he has. She's also portrayed as promiscuous and intellectually limited, though later seasons have shown her trying to set boundaries with Cartman with limited success. The question of Cartman's father has been a running mystery in the show, and the truth was eventually revealed in a convoluted storyline. Leanne Cartman was initially presented as a hermaphrodite, who was both Cartman's father and mother in a Season 2 episode, though this explanation was later retconned. The Season 14 episode 201 revealed that Cartman's father was actually Jack Tenorman, Scott's father. This revelation added a darker layer to the Scott Tenorman Must Die episode, suggesting Cartman had unknowingly murdered his own father and fed him to his half-brother, though Cartman only learned this years after the fact. Cartman's anti-Semitism is one of his most prominent and disturbing characteristics. His hatred of Kyle specifically, and Jews generally, has been a driving force behind numerous episodes. He's dressed up as Hitler. He's tried to organize a new Holocaust. He's constantly making anti-Semitic remarks and trying to convince others to join him in persecuting Jewish people. The show uses Cartman's bigotry to satirize real anti-Semitism, showing how ridiculous and evil it is by embodying it in a fat fourth grader. But Cartman isn't just anti-Semitic. He's bigoted against pretty much everyone who isn't exactly like him. And even then, he'd probably find a reason to hate them too. He's racist, sexist, homophobic, and xenophobic. His prejudices aren't based on any actual beliefs or experiences. They're just manifestations of his need to feel superior to others, to have someone to blame for his problems, and to justify his own terrible behavior. What's particularly chilling about Cartman is his intelligence. He's arguably the smartest of the four boys when he applies himself, capable of elaborate manipulations, long-term planning, and psychological warfare. He understands people well enough to exploit their weaknesses. He can fake emotions convincingly. He's created entire companies, orchestrated complex schemes, and talked his way out of situations that should have ended with his arrest or death. The Scott Tenorman Must Die episode is often cited as the moment Cartman went from being a regular villain to something truly dark. In that episode, Cartman's revenge plot against a teenager who scammed him results in Cartman literally feeding Scott his own parents. The reveal is played for horror as much as humor, with Cartman standing there reveling in his victory while Scott breaks down. Radiohead even shows up to call Scott a crybaby, and it's a masterpiece of dark comedy that redefined what Cartman was capable of. Cartman's schemes often have a quality of childish imagination combined with adult malice. He'll dress up in elaborate costumes, create fake identities, build complex props and staging, all in service of hurting someone or getting what he wants, His commitment is absolute. When he decides to do something, he goes all in, regardless of how much work it requires or how many lines he has to cross. The coon persona Cartman created represents his desire for power and recognition. As the coon, he's a superhero based on a raccoon, complete with costume and gadgets. But Cartman, being Cartman, he uses the coon identity mainly to beat up people he doesn't like and to try to profit from being a superhero. When other kids create their own superhero personas and form a team, Cartman is furious that they won't follow his leadership, revealing how his desire to be special is really a desire to dominate others. Cartman's relationship with his mother is deeply dysfunctional. He treats her terribly, manipulating her, yelling at her, demanding things from her, and generally acting like a tyrannical ruler with an obedient servant. Liane enables this behavior by giving in to his demands and rarely setting boundaries. The few times she's tried to discipline him, Cartman has either worn her down through persistence or found ways to punish her for defying him. One of the most interesting aspects of Cartman is how he occasionally shows glimpses of humanity before immediately crushing them. There have been moments where he's seemed genuinely happy, or vulnerable, or almost capable of kindness. But these moments are fleeting, usually serving as setups for him to do something even worse. Cartman will team up with the other boys against a common enemy, making you think maybe he's capable of friendship, only to betray them the moment it benefits him. Cartman's obesity and his relationship with food is a constant theme. He'll do anything for junk food, particularly cheesy poofs and KFC. His gluttony is portrayed as both pathetic and dangerous, as he's willing to hurt others to satisfy his appetite. The Weight Gain 4000 episode from Season 1 established his food obsession early, and it's been a consistent character trait ever since. The show has explored what Cartman might become as an adult in several future set episodes. The results are usually either that he's become even worse and using his intelligence and lack of conscience to succeed in business or politics, or occasionally that he's found some kind of redemption. The post-COVID specials showed an adult Cartman living as a rabbi with a family, suggesting he'd completely reformed. But even this turned out to be partially a manipulation, showing that Cartman's evil is so deep that even apparent redemption might be another scheme. Cartman's singing voice, also provided by Parker, is surprisingly good. He's performed multiple songs throughout the series, from Kyle's Mom is a Big Fat Bitch to Come Sail Away by Styx. His musical numbers are often highlights of episodes, showing that even in his villainy, Cartman has talents that could be used for good if he weren't fundamentally evil. The question of whether Cartman will ever truly change or face consequences for his actions is ongoing. Sometimes he gets his comeuppance, facing humiliation or defeat. But just as often, he succeeds in his schemes, learns nothing from his failures, and continues being terrible. This inconsistency is part of what makes him interesting. Unlike characters in shows with strong continuity, Cartman doesn't have to grow or evolve. He can be reset to his baseline awfulness each week. Cartman represents the worst impulses of humanity distilled into a child character. He's every entitled bigot, every manipulative narcissist, every person who hurts others for personal gain. But by putting all that into a cartoon fourth grader, Parker and Stone have created a character who can say and do things that would be unwatchable from an adult character. A Cartman works because his evil is so absurd that it circles back around to being funny, while simultaneously serving as a genuine critique of the real evil in the world. Cartman's schemes throughout the series have ranged from petty to apocalyptic. He's formed a boy band called Finger Bang, tried to exterminate hippies at a music festival, created his own amusement park called Cartman Land just to exclude everyone else, and convinced an entire stadium of people that he could see the future. Each scheme reveals something about his character, whether it's his need for control, his desire for attention, or his complete lack of empathy for others. The Cartman Land episode is particularly revealing. When he inherits $1 million from his grandmother, his first thought isn't to help anyone or even to enjoy the money in a normal way. He buys an amusement park and refuses to let anyone else in, not because he particularly enjoys rides, but because he enjoys the power of exclusion. The fact that he has to eventually let people in to pay for maintenance makes him miserable, showing that for Cartman, the cruelty is often the point rather than a side effect. His relationship with authority is complex. He respects power when he wants something from it, demanding that others respect his authority, while simultaneously being one of the first to rebel against actual authority figures when they try to control him. He's created elaborate personas to fool adults, from dressing as a robot in Awesomeo to posing as a psychic in Cartman's Incredible Gift. His ability to manipulate adults, to tell them what they want to hear while pursuing his own agenda, shows intelligence that could be admirable if it weren't so consistently directed toward evil ends. Cartman's musical talents are surprisingly well developed. He's performed numerous songs throughout the series, from Kyle's Mom is a Big Fat Bitch to religious hymns he uses to manipulate Christian rock fans in Christian Rock Hard. His voice, provided by Trey Parker, is genuinely good, capable of hitting notes and carrying melodies. This musical ability adds another layer to his character, showing that he has legitimate talents that could be used for good if he weren't fundamentally corrupt. The Imagination Land trilogy showed Cartman at perhaps his most obsessive. After making a bet with Kyle that leprechauns don't exist, and then being proven wrong when they discover Imagination Land, and Cartman spends 3 episodes pursuing Kyle to make him honor their bet, which involves Kyle sucking Cartman's balls. While the main plot involves terrorists attacking Imagination Land and the government's response, Cartman's subplot about forcing Kyle to humiliate himself demonstrates his pettiness and his inability to let anything go. Cartman's brief period as the Coon, his Batman-like superhero persona, revealed his desire to be seen as a hero while still behaving like a villain. He created an elaborate costume, developed a backstory, and genuinely seemed to believe he was fighting crime. But his methods involved beating up people he didn't like and trying to get paid for his heroism. When other kids formed Coon and Friends and wouldn't let him be the leader, he turned on them immediately, it even briefly siding with the villain Cthulhu to get revenge. The character's evolution over 27 seasons shows how Parker and Stone have pushed Cartman further into darkness with each year. Early Cartman was a bratty kid who said offensive things. Middle period Cartman was actively evil, but still somewhat cartoonish. Modern Cartman is genuinely frightening, capable of plotting elaborate revenges and showing no remorse for the pain he causes. This escalation has been gradual enough that it feels natural, even as it's taken the character to places that would be unwatchable if not handled with such skill. Cartman's few moments of vulnerability are all the more striking because they're so rare. When he genuinely thought he was dying in Cartman's Silly Hate Crime 2000, he showed fear and sadness, and when he believed his stuffed animals had abandoned him, he experienced real grief. These moments humanize him just enough to make him complex, rather than simply a cartoon villain. We see that Cartman is capable of feeling hurt, which makes his choice to hurt others more damning rather than more sympathetic. The running gag of Cartman's attempts to eliminate Kyle specifically, and Jews generally, has been a through line of the series. He's dressed as Hitler. He's tried to create a new Holocaust. He's developed elaborate plans to make Kyle's life miserable. And he's even tried to manipulate Kyle into taking his own life. This obsession with Kyle goes beyond normal rivalry into something much darker. Cartman sees Kyle as the one person who consistently defeats him, who sees through his schemes, who refuses to be manipulated, and that makes Kyle both Cartman's greatest enemy and perhaps the only person Cartman actually respects on some level. Episodes that focus on Cartman's home life, like Tst, where his mother finally tries to discipline him by hiring a dog trainer, show how his upbringing has created the monster he's become. Leanne's complete inability to set boundaries, her decision to give Cartman whatever he wants to avoid conflict, has taught him that tantrums and manipulation work. When the dog trainer's methods actually start working, making Cartman behave like a normal child, Leanne can't maintain the discipline. She'd rather have a terrible son who loves her than a well-behaved son who respects her. This episode is one of the show's most depressing because it shows that Cartman could have been fixed, but the adults in his life chose not to fix him. Cartman's business ventures throughout the series have ranged from surprisingly successful to complete disasters. He's run a Christian rock band that achieved genuine success by making barely modified pop songs with religious lyrics. He started a security company. He's attempted various get-rich-quick schemes. His ability to identify opportunities and manipulate situations to his advantage shows entrepreneurial instincts, even if those instincts are always directed towards selfish or harmful ends. In a different context, with different moral guidance, Cartman could probably be a successful businessman. Unfortunately, his lack of ethics means his successes usually involve hurting others. The way Cartman talks about his feelings, when he bothers to acknowledge them at all, reveals his narcissism and inability to empathize. He genuinely doesn't understand why people are upset when he hurts them. He sees his own pain as uniquely important, while dismissing others' suffering as irrelevant or deserved. This psychological profile, if he were a real person, would suggest serious personality disorders, possibly sociopathy or narcissistic personality disorder. The show plays this for comedy, but there's something genuinely chilling about a child character who displays such a complete absence of human compassion. Despite all his terrible qualities, or perhaps because of them, Cartman has become the breakout star of South Park. He's the character on merchandise, the one everyone quotes, the one who drives the plot of many of the show's best episodes. His popularity is a testament to how compelling pure evil can be when it's written well and performed brilliantly. Eric Cartman is a monster, but he's our monster, and South Park wouldn't be the same without him. The question the show keeps asking, but never quite answers, is whether Cartman's evil is innate or created, whether he was born a monster or made into one. The answer is probably both, which makes him all the more interesting and all the more disturbing. Kenny McCormick, the mysterious kid who won't stay dead. Kenneth McCormick is the most mysterious of South Park's main 4 characters, and for good reason. For the first 5 seasons of the show, Kenny died in nearly every episode, only to reappear in the next one with no explanation. His face is almost always hidden behind the hood of his orange parka, which muffles his speech to the point of incomprehensibility. He comes from the poorest family in South Park at suffering neglect and abuse at home while maintaining surprising resilience and good nature with his friends. Kenny's look is iconic. Orange parka, orange pants, brown gloves. The parka's hood is pulled so tight that only his eyes are visible, and even those are often obscured. This costume choice was brilliant because it made Kenny visually distinctive, while also creating the running gag of muffled speech. Matt Stone provides Kenny's voice, speaking through his hands, to create that distinctive muffled sound that became one of the show's signatures. The death gag defined Kenny's character for years. Each episode would find elaborate and often grotesque ways for Kenny to die, from being crushed by falling objects, to being torn apart by animals, to dying from disease. After each death, Stan and Kyle would perform their ritualized response. "Oh my God, they killed Kenny. You bastards." This catchphrase became so popular that it transcended the show itself, becoming part of the broader cultural conversation about South Park. But here's what made the death gag actually interesting. Kenny remembers dying. This was eventually explained in the Mysterian Rises trilogy, where it's revealed that Kenny has a curse of immortality. Every time he dies, he wakes up the next day in his bed, alive again, with full memory of how he died. His parents also have vague memories of his deaths, but mostly forget. For everyone else, Kenny's deaths and resurrections are barely noticed. This curse means Kenny has experienced unimaginable trauma, dying hundreds of painful deaths and having to live with those memories. The curse gives Kenny an unusual perspective. He knows death intimately. He's experienced almost every type of death imaginable. This knowledge makes him more mature than the other boys in some ways, though it's rarely explicitly addressed. Kenny knows that life is fragile and often meaningless, that death can come at any moment in any form, and that he'll have to experience it all over again soon. This existential burden is hidden behind the silly orange parka and the incomprehensible speech. Kenny's family situation is genuinely tragic. His parents, Stuart and Carol McCormick, are poor, often unemployed, and struggle with alcohol abuse. They fight constantly, sometimes violently, and generally neglect their children. Kenny has a younger sister named Karen, who he clearly cares about deeply, often trying to protect her from their parents' dysfunction and the general misery of their poverty. His affection for Karen is one of Kenny's few consistently shown positive emotions. The show has never shied away from depicting the McCormick family's poverty. They live in a ramshackle house in the poor part of town. They eat frozen waffles for dinner. Kenny wears the same orange parka every day because it's probably the only winter coat he has. Cartman constantly mocks Kenny for being poor, calling him poor trash, and joking about his family's situation. These jokes from Cartman are cruel, but they highlight a real issue the show addresses: how poverty affects children. Kenny is portrayed as the most sexually knowledgeable and experienced of the group. In early episodes, when an unfamiliar term came up, the other boys would ask Kenny to explain, and his muffled response would either enlighten or confuse them further. Kenny is sexually precocious in ways the other boys aren't, making crude jokes and showing interests that seem advanced for his age. The implication throughout the series is that growing up poor and neglected has exposed Kenny to adult content and situations he shouldn't know about yet, accelerating his awareness of mature topics. When Kenny was killed off permanently at the end of Season 5 in Kenny Dies, it marked a significant shift for the show. For most of Season 6, the group tried to replace Kenny with other kids, first Butters and then Tweek. But fans hated Kenny being gone, and the show itself seemed to miss him. He was brought back in Red Sleigh Down, the season 6 finale, and has been a regular presence since, though he no longer dies in every episode. The reduction of the death gag actually allowed Kenny to develop as a character. We got to see more of his personality, his relationships, his life outside of dying. The Mysterian trilogy in particular gave Kenny substantial character development, revealing his curse and showing his superhero alter ego. As Mysterian, Kenny can use his immortality strategically, dying to gather information or escape situations, knowing he'll come back. Kenny's alter ego Mysterian is fascinating because it shows how Kenny has processed his curse. Instead of being destroyed by the knowledge of his immortality, he's found a way to use it for good. Mysterian is a dark, Batman-like figure who fights crime and protects the innocent. His costume hides his identity, and his willingness to sacrifice himself makes him effective. The other kids don't initially know Mysterian is Kenny, though they eventually figure it out. In the Coon storyline, Mysterian becomes the true hero in opposition to Cartman's Coon. While Cartman wants fame and glory, Kenny as Mysterian genuinely wants to help people, especially his sister Karen. His immortality is revealed when he shoots himself in the head in front of everyone to prove he can't die, one of the darkest moments in the show. The fact that Kenny is willing to demonstrate his curse by literally killing himself shows how much the trauma has affected him. Kenny's relationship with the other boys is interesting because it's less defined than the relationships between Stan, Kyle, and Cartman. Kenny is friends with all of them, but he's not super best friends with anyone the way Stan and Kyle are with each other. He's kind of the fourth wheel, the one who's present, but not always central to the action. This outsider status fits with his character. Kenny is literally dying and coming back unnoticed, existing on the periphery, even when he's right there. One of Kenny's most notable characteristics is that despite his constant deaths and horrible home life, he maintains a generally positive attitude. He shows up for school, hangs out with his friends, and participates in their adventures. He doesn't wallow in self-pity or lash out at others. This resilience is admirable and tragic. Kenny has every reason to be bitter and angry, but he just keeps living, or rather, keeps dying and coming back to life again. The show has explored Kenny's poverty in meaningful ways, and episodes like Best Friends Forever, where Kenny dies and his soul goes to heaven, only to have his body kept on life support in a Terry Schiavo parody, show how his poverty affects his family's choices. His parents can't afford proper medical care. His death becomes a political football. Even in death, Kenny can't escape the limitations his poverty imposes. Kenny's role in episodes varies widely. Sometimes he's central to the plot, like in Chimpokomon, where he becomes obsessed with the titular toys, or The Ring, where he has to work at TGI Fridays while dealing with girlfriend drama. Other times, he's barely present, just hanging around, while other characters drive the story. This inconsistency is part of his character. Kenny is there, but not always the focus, dying and returning without much acknowledgement from anyone. The Princess Kenny persona from the Black Friday trilogy shows another side of Kenny's character. While playing Game of Thrones-style fantasy games, Kenny dresses as an anime-style princess. It's played for laughs, but it also shows Kenny's willingness to embrace femininity and his comfort with gender nonconformity. Princess Kenny is beautiful, powerful, and utterly committed to the role, betraying both sides in the console wars to pursue her own agenda. Kenny's voice when he's not wearing his parka heard in a few episodes like The Jeffersons, reveals he sounds pretty normal, kind of like Stan. This makes the muffled speech even more obviously a result of the Parker, rather than something inherent to Kenny. It also emphasizes how much Kenny is hiding behind that orange hood, literally and figuratively. We rarely see his full face or hear his clear voice, keeping him mysterious even after hundreds of episodes. In the post-COVID specials set decades in the future, Kenny has become a successful entrepreneur selling NFTs under the identity Victor Chaos, working alongside Butters. He's gained weight, grown a beard, and wears Hawaiian shirts. The specials reveal he died before the main events, leaving behind a message about how to fix the timeline. His death drives the plot even from beyond the grave, reinforcing how mortality remains central to his character arc even in potential futures. Kenny McCormick represents the forgotten children of poverty, the ones who suffer in silence while the world ignores them. His deaths are metaphors for how poor kids are disposable in society's eyes, undying from neglect and violence while everyone acts like it's normal. His resurrections show the cycle these kids are trapped in, coming back to the same terrible circumstances again and again. But Kenny also represents resilience and hope, the ability to keep going even when everything is terrible, to find moments of joy and friendship despite constant suffering. He's the kid who won't give up, even though giving up would be entirely understandable. That's what makes Kenny McCormick matter. Randy Marsh. When the dad became the star, Randy Marsh started as a background character, just Stan's dorky dad who showed up occasionally for parent-teacher conferences or town meetings. But over the course of South Park's run, Randy has evolved into arguably the show's co-protagonist, sometimes overshadowing the kids entirely. His transformation from supporting character to central figure mirrors how Trey Parker's relationship with the show has changed as Parker has aged and started relating more to the adult characters than the children. Randy is 45 years old and works as a geologist, though his actual expertise in geology is questionable. He has a master's degree and supposedly works for the US Geological Survey, but we rarely see him doing actual geology. What we see instead is Randy getting obsessed with whatever trend or crisis is currently gripping South Park, throwing himself into it with complete disregard for his family or responsibilities. His tendency to overreact and obsessively seize upon irrational ideas is his defining characteristic. You can recognize Randy by his glasses, dark blue shirt, and general appearance of a middle-aged man who's let himself go a bit. His receding hairline and slightly pudgy build mark him as unremarkable, which makes his extreme behavior even funnier. Randy should be boring, should be the responsible adult, but instead he's often the most chaotic person in any situation. Trey Parker provides Randy's voice, giving him that enthusiastic but slightly dim quality that makes even his worst ideas sound somewhat reasonable. Randy's evolution really accelerated around season 8. Episodes like The Losing Edge, where Randy fights other dads at Stan's Little League games, showed his competitive and immature side. His famous line, "I thought this was America," became a meme, capturing Randy's entitled frustration when things don't go his way. From there, Randy increasingly became the focus of episode plots, all dealing with everything from taking massive shits to becoming a Broadway producer to secretly being the pop star Lord. The Lord revelation is one of Randy's most absurd storylines. Starting in The Sissy, it's revealed that Randy has been secretly producing and performing music as Lord, wearing a wig and using a synthesizer to create the hit songs attributed to the real-life New Zealand singer. This became a running gag, suggesting that much of the Marsh family's income comes from Randy's Lord career rather than his geology job. The fact that Randy can somehow pass as a teenage girl and that nobody questions it is typical South Park absurdity. But Randy's most significant transformation came with Tegrity Farms. In the season 22 episode Tegrity Farms, Randy becomes frustrated with modern problems like vaping and school shootings. It convinces Sharon to sell their house and moves the family to a farm where he starts growing marijuana. This wasn't meant to be a permanent change. It was just an episode plot. But Parker and Stone liked the concept so much that they stuck with it for years, making Randy's farm the central location for many episodes. Tegrity Farms represented Randy's ultimate midlife crisis. He completely uprooted his family's life without really consulting them, pursuing his dream of being a marijuana farmer with integrity. The irony, of course, is that Randy has no integrity whatsoever. He's willing to compromise, cheat, steal, and betray his principles the moment it's convenient. His lectures about having tegrity while behaving without any integrity is the joke. The Tegrity Farms era saw Randy become more of a main character than Stan. For season 23 even changed the opening sequence to promote Tegrity Farms, with Randy singing a country song about his farm. This shift divided fans. Some loved seeing Randy's adventures and appreciated the adult perspective. Others missed the kids being the focus and felt Randy's antics had become too repetitive and self-indulgent. Randy's behavior during the Tegrity Farms years became increasingly abusive toward his family. He forced Stan to promote the farm at school. He neglected Sharon's needs and concerns. He endangered Shelley by exposing her to marijuana constantly, contributing to her developing a dependency. His obsession with making Tegrity Farms successful overrode any consideration for how his choices affected the people who depended on him. The farm storylines took Randy to China, had him warring with rival marijuana businesses, and saw him partnering with characters like Towley to create special marijuana strains. Randy would try anything to make money, including selling out his principles and endangering others. His moral decay over the Tegrity Farms arc showed how someone can justify terrible behavior when they convince themselves they're pursuing a higher purpose. Randy's relationship with his wife Sharon has been tumultuous throughout the series. They've separated multiple times, most notably in You're Getting Old and Asperger's. Sharon has grown increasingly tired of Randy's behavior, his obsessions, and his inability to act like a responsible adult. She's often the voice of reason, trying to get Randy to see how his actions affect the family. But Randy rarely listens. He's too caught up in whatever he's currently obsessed with to pay attention to his wife's legitimate concerns. The post-COVID specials showed a future where Randy is an elderly man in a nursing home, with Tegrity Farms burned to the ground. In this dark timeline, it's revealed he had locked Shelley in a barn, forcing her to do farm work, and she died when Stan burned down the farm in frustration. The special also revealed Randy was the patient zero for COVID-19, having contracted it through contact with a pangolin in China. This origin story positioned Randy as inadvertently responsible for the global pandemic, fitting with his pattern of causing large-scale disasters through reckless personal behavior. Randy's relationship with his son, Stan, has become increasingly strained as Randy has become more self-absorbed. Stan went from looking up to his father to being deeply embarrassed and frustrated by him. Randy's behavior at Stan's baseball games, his public displays of stupidity, and his forcing the family to move to Tegrity Farms have all eroded Stan's respect for his father. Stan often finds himself having to be the responsible one, the adult in their relationship, which is backward and emotionally exhausting for a child. Randy's father Marvin, known as Grandpa, is a regular presence in the Marsh household. Marvin is ancient, bitter, and frequently asks to be killed, saying things like, "Why won't you let me die?" which everyone laughs off as his hilarious eccentricity. Randy's relationship with Marvin mirrors how Randy treats Stan. Randy often speaks down to Marvin, treating him like a child rather than his father, and this pattern of condescension and disrespect flows through the Marsh family dynamics. In season 27, Randy finally sells Tegrity Farms and moves the family back to South Park in the episode Sycophancy. This ended a nearly 7-year storyline that had become divisive among fans. Randy's decision to return to normal life suggested a return to form for the show, though whether he'll actually stay settled or find new obsessions remains to be seen. Randy Marsh has proven repeatedly that he can't just be normal for very long. What makes Randy fascinating as a character is how he represents the worst of American masculinity's midlife crisis. He's selfish, impulsive, obsessive, and unwilling to accept responsibility for his failures. He chases fads, invents problems, and generally makes everything worse while convincing himself he's improving things. Randy is the guy who watched too many self-help videos and came away thinking he's qualified to uproot his entire life based on a vague feeling of dissatisfaction. Randy's obsessions have included fighting other dads, playing World of Warcraft to the point of becoming morbidly obese, getting addicted to the Home Shopping Network, becoming a Broadway producer, joining a biker gang, and countless others. Each obsession is all-consuming until it suddenly isn't, at which point Randy moves on to the next thing without learning anything from the previous disaster. This pattern makes him consistently entertaining, but also genuinely pathetic. The show has used Randy to comment on adult behavior in ways it couldn't with the kids. Randy represents how adults are often just as immature and stupid as children, but with more power to cause damage. His storylines tackle everything from marijuana legalization to immigration to pandemic response, using Randy's incompetence and selfishness to satirize how real adults handle these issues. Randy is every clueless man who thinks his opinions matter more than they do, who acts without thinking about consequences, who prioritizes his feelings over facts. Randy's specific episodes have become legendary within the South Park fandom. Make Love Not Warcraft featured Randy and the boys grinding in World of Warcraft for weeks, with Randy becoming morbidly obese and developing a condition where he had to defecate in a bedpan while continuing to play. The dedication to the game and the physical toll it took on Randy's body was both absurd and somehow relatable to anyone who's ever gotten too obsessed with a video game. Medicinal Fried Chicken showed Randy developing testicular cancer deliberately so he could get a medical marijuana prescription. He bounced around on his enlarged testicles like a hippity-hop, treating his cancer as an inconvenience worth suffering for legal weed access. This episode perfectly captured Randy's willingness to endure ridiculous hardships for whatever he's currently obsessed with, showing his complete lack of proportionality in addressing problems. The Bloody Mary episode had Randy dealing with alcoholism through faith healing at a statue of the Virgin Mary that appeared to be bleeding from its backside. Randy's journey from denial about his drinking to acceptance that he might have a problem to deciding he doesn't actually have a problem because the statue cured him shows his inability to genuinely confront his issues. He'd rather believe in a miracle than do the actual work of changing his behavior. Randy's adventures in The Losing Edge established his character as the dad who takes kids' activities too seriously. He got into brutal fights with other fathers at Stan's Little League games, treating these matches like life or death struggles. His famous, "I thought this was America" line came from this episode, delivered while being arrested for fighting. Randy's complete inability to maintain perspective, his transformation of children's sports into personal warfare, and set the template for how his character would handle every future obsession. Episodes like Broadway Bro Down revealed Randy's unexpected talents and knowledge. He discovered that Broadway musicals contain secret sexual messages that cause women to become aroused, and he used this knowledge to improve his sex life with Sharon. This bizarre revelation led to Randy becoming involved in Broadway production, showing his ability to insert himself into any situation and somehow make it about his own needs and desires. The pandemic two-part episode featured Randy forming a Peruvian flute band to make money, dragging the boys along despite their complete lack of interest. When giant guinea pigs attack, and the government blames the lack of Peruvian flute bands for allowing this to happen, Randy's random scheme accidentally saves the world. These moments, where Randy's stupidity somehow results in success, reinforce his character's charmed existence, where consequences rarely stick. Randy's encounter with Bono in More Crap involved Randy taking what he believed was the largest crap ever recorded, only to discover Bono himself holds the record. The episodes reveal that Bono is literally a piece of crap was typical South Park absurdity, but Randy's obsession with being record holder for defecation showed his need to be special at anything, even the most ridiculous achievements. His transformation into Lord wasn't just a one-off joke. The show committed to this bit across multiple seasons, having Randy sneak away to recording studios, perform at concerts, and deal with the pressures of being a secret pop star. The Sissy episode established this, and it kept recurring, and with Randy's Lord persona, becoming a significant source of family income. Sharon's acceptance of her husband being a cross-dressing pop star showed how desensitized she'd become to Randy's bizarre behavior. The Cock Magic episode where Randy performs magic tricks involving roosters at children's birthday parties showed another side of his character, the willingness to exploit anything for attention and money. He treated this underground rooster gambling ring as a legitimate entertainment, completely missing the obvious illegality and immorality of what he was doing. This pattern of Randy finding grey area or outright illegal activities and treating them as normal business ventures repeats throughout his storylines. Randy's political views shift with whatever's trendy or beneficial to him at the moment. He's been liberal, conservative, and libertarian, whatever serves his current needs. This political opportunism makes him a perfect vehicle for the show's satire of American politics, showing how many people's political beliefs are actually just self-interest dressed up as principles. Randy doesn't stand for anything except Randy, which is exactly the point. His relationship with his father Marvin is marked by condescension and dismissiveness. Randy talks down to Marvin, treats his request to die as jokes, and generally fails to show respect for the man who raised him. This mirrors how Randy treats Stan, creating a multi-generational pattern of Marsh men disrespecting each other. The cycle continues, with each generation failing to break the pattern of emotional unavailability and dismissiveness. Randy's brief divorce from Sharon in You're Getting Old was one of the show's most serious storylines. It revealed that Randy and Sharon had grown apart. that Randy's increasingly childish behavior was actually his way of coping with unhappiness in his marriage. They got back together in Asperger's, but the underlying issues were never really resolved. They just decided that being unhappy together was better than being unhappy apart, which is a depressingly realistic portrayal of many real marriages. The Tegrity Farm's years saw Randy at his most insufferable. He lectured everyone about having integrity while demonstrating none. He traveled to China to make deals with the government while criticizing others for selling out. He created special marijuana strains with increasingly ridiculous names and properties. He fought with neighbors, with large corporations, with his own family, all while insisting he was the victim and everyone else was wrong. Randy's Christmas special involvement, where he sold cocaine as Christmas snow, showed his willingness to deal hard drugs if it meant making money. His justification that it was only seasonal, that he'd stop after winter, demonstrated his ability to rationalize absolutely anything. The fact that he got it legalized in multiple states before selling it showed his entrepreneurial cunning, even when applied to obviously terrible ideas. Throughout all these storylines, Randy remains convinced he's a good person who's just misunderstood. He sees himself as a truth teller, a maverick, someone willing to do what others won't. In reality, he's selfish, impulsive, and damaging to everyone around him. But his complete lack of self-awareness, combined with occasional moments of accidental wisdom, makes him compelling to watch. Randy Marsh has become so popular that some fans consider him the true main character of modern South Park. His journey from geologist dad to marijuana farmer to whatever comes next has been one of the show's most significant arcs. Whether you love him or find him exhausting, there's no denying that Randy has become essential to South Park's identity. He's the character Parker and Stone use to process their own aging, their own cynicism, their own realization that adults are making everything up as they go along. Randy Marsh is us, if we gave in to every stupid impulse and didn't care about the consequences. And that's both hilarious and terrifying. I'm Butters Stotch, the innocent who survives. Leopold Butters Stotch represents something precious and rare in South Park. Genuine innocence. In a show filled with cynicism, cruelty, and darkness, Butters stands out as the kid who still believes in goodness, still tries to see the best in people, and still hasn't let the world's awfulness crush his spirit. That doesn't mean he's stupid or boring. Butters is one of the show's most complex and tragic characters, someone who maintains his optimism despite suffering more abuse than almost anyone else in South Park. Butters is a small, thin kid with blonde hair styled in a distinctive swoop, and he typically wears a turquoise jacket and dark green pants. His appearance is deliberately non-threatening and childlike, reinforcing his innocent nature. Matt Stone voices Butters with a gentle, stuttering delivery that makes him sound vulnerable and sweet, even when he's doing something supposedly evil. What makes Butters' innocence remarkable is that it persists despite his home life. His parents, Stephen and Linda Stotch, are arguably the worst parents in South Park, which is saying something. They ground Butters constantly, often for things he didn't do or couldn't control. They're emotionally abusive, paranoid, and quick to blame Butters for everything. When Butters addresses his father, he calls him Sir rather than Dad, showing the formal, fear-based relationship they have. The Stotch parents have done genuinely terrible things to Butters. Stephen tried to kill Butters in Butters' very own episode, when he thought Butters had discovered his secret homosexual encounters. Linda became so convinced Butters was evil that she tried to murder him, They've sent him to conversion therapy, locked him out of his house, and grounded him so many times for such minor infractions that it's become a running gag. Butters' response to all this is to keep trying to be good, to make them proud, to avoid being grounded. His desperation for their approval is heartbreaking. Butters became a major character starting in season 6, when Kenny was temporarily killed off. The boys tried Butters as Kenny's replacement, but he was too lame, too innocent, too sweet to fit with their group dynamic. This rejection hurt Butters deeply, leading to the creation of his alter ego, Professor Chaos. As Professor Chaos, Butters tries to be a supervillain, wearing a crude costume made from cardboard and tinfoil, complete with a cape. His evil schemes include things like flooding the world with a garden hose and switching the orders at Bennigan's, petty pranks that barely qualify as mischief, let alone villainy. Professor Chaos is hilarious because of the contrast between Butters' gentle nature and his attempts to be evil. He recruited Dougie as his psychic general disarray, and together they tried to cause chaos, but mostly just cause minor inconveniences. The running gag where they come up with evil schemes only for Dougie to point out Simpsons did it shows how even Butters' attempts at originality in evil are doomed. But Professor Chaos also represents something important. Butters' need to fight back against a world that constantly rejects and abuses him. Despite being rejected as Kenny's replacement, Butters has remained a central character. He's become the unofficial 5th member of the main group, the de facto 4th friend when they need an even number or when Kenny's not around. But his relationship with the boys, particularly Cartman, is complicated. Cartman uses Butters constantly, exploiting his naivety and desperation to be liked. Butters will do almost anything Cartman asks, hoping it will make Cartman his friend, only to be betrayed and humiliated repeatedly. The episode Awesome-O is a perfect example of this dynamic. Cartman dresses up as a robot to trick Butters into revealing embarrassing secrets, which Cartman plans to use to humiliate him. But Butters treats Awesome-O with such genuine kindness and affection that it almost makes Cartman feel guilty. Almost. Butters confides his deepest secrets to the robot, including that he has a video of Cartman dancing to Britney Spears. When Cartman's deception is revealed, Butters finally gets revenge by showing the video to the whole town, humiliating Cartman for once. Butters' capacity for love and forgiveness is both his greatest strength and his biggest weakness. He gets taken advantage of because he trusts people. He gets hurt because he cares. But he also experiences genuine happiness and connection in ways the more cynical characters can't. His monologue in Raisins, where he talks about beautiful sadness after being dumped by a girl, shows his emotional intelligence. Butters understands that feeling sad means you felt something good first, and that the full spectrum of emotions is what makes you human. The show has explored Butters' emotional life in fascinating ways. He's capable of deep love, as shown when he falls for a waitress at Raisins, a parody of Hooters. He's capable of rage, as shown when he finally snaps and goes on a grounding spree, grounding everyone who's ever been mean to him. He's capable of manipulation, using his innocent appearance to run a surprisingly successful kissing business or to con people into giving him money. Butters contains multitudes beneath that sweet exterior. Butters has also been given several alter egos beyond Professor Chaos. He's been Margarine, dressing as a girl to infiltrate a slumber party. He's been a pimp, running a surprisingly ethical prostitution ring for the boys that even included healthcare benefits. He's been possessed by evil forces, These alternate personas show that Butters is more than just the innocent kid. He has depths, desires, and capabilities that emerge when circumstances push him out of his usual role. One of the most interesting aspects of Butters is how he occasionally delivers the moral lesson at the end of episodes, a role usually reserved for Stan or Kyle. When Butters gives these speeches, they're often more profound because they come from someone who's maintained his innocence rather than someone who's jaded. Butters believes in the lessons he preaches because he hasn't become cynical enough to dismiss them as meaningless. Butters' tap dancing skills, revealed in You Got F'd in the A, are surprisingly impressive. His talent for dancing shows he has abilities beyond what people give him credit for. He's also shown musical talent in other episodes, suggesting Butters could excel at many things if he weren't constantly being held back by his parents' restrictions and his peers' exploitation. The post-COVID specials show adult Butters living under the alias Victor Chaos. Having fully embraced his Professor Chaos persona, he's made millions convincing people to invest in NFTs, showing his capacity for manipulation when unleashed. However, he's also been locked in a psychiatric hospital for this behavior, suggesting society views his success as a sign of mental illness rather than business acumen. Even in adulthood, Butters can't quite escape being punished for his actions. Butters' role in the superhero storylines as Professor Chaos makes him an antagonist to Coon and friends. But he's the least threatening antagonist imaginable. His schemes are still relatively harmless, and his costume is still homemade, and his motivations are still rooted in hurt feelings rather than genuine evil. When the Coon and friends beat him up, it feels like bullying rather than heroism, which is kind of the point. The relationship between Butters and his parents has occasionally shown cracks in their united front against him. Sometimes, Linda seems to realize they're being too hard on Butters, or Stephen shows a moment of actual care for his son. But these moments are fleeting, quickly overridden by their paranoia and cruelty. The Stotches are so afraid of the world corrupting their son that they're corrupting him themselves through their abuse. Butters represents what childhood should be: innocent, imaginative, resilient, and full of hope. And the fact that he maintains these qualities despite everything he endures makes him heroic in a way the other characters aren't. He's been grounded unjustly, abused by his parents, exploited by his friends, and rejected by his peers. Yet he keeps showing up with a smile, ready to believe things might be better tomorrow. That persistence in maintaining hope despite all evidence to the contrary makes Butters Stotch one of South Park's most important characters. He's proof that innocence can survive, even in the worst circumstances, and that maybe that innocence is worth protecting. Herbert Garrison, the teacher who became president. Herbert Garrison is probably South Park's most complex character, having gone through more dramatic transformations than anyone else in the show. He's been a closeted gay man, an openly gay man, a trans woman named Janet, a straight man again, and the President of the United States serving as a stand-in for Donald Trump. His journey has touched on identity, sexuality, politics, and education in ways that make him fascinating and controversial. Mr. Garrison has been the boys' teacher since the show began, though his grade level has shifted. He started as their third grade teacher, became the kindergarten teacher briefly, then moved back to teaching them in fourth grade, where he's remained. His teaching methods are famously terrible. He shows movies that have nothing to do with the curriculum, asks questions that make no sense, and generally seems unprepared for every class. Despite having a degree in mechanical engineering, He clearly has no idea what he's doing as a teacher. Trey Parker voices Mr. Garrison, and giving him that distinctive nasal, neurotic quality that makes everything he says sound slightly unhinged. Garrison's tendency to go on tangents, his sudden shifts from calm to hysterical, and his willingness to say the most inappropriate things in front of children make him one of the show's most unpredictable characters. You never quite know if Garrison is going to teach a lesson, have a breakdown, or say something so offensive that it becomes a major plot point. For the first several seasons, Garrison used a ventriloquist dummy named Mr. Hat as a teaching aid and a way to express thoughts he wouldn't say directly. Mr. Hat was racist, homophobic, and cruel, saying things Garrison supposedly disagreed with while clearly using the puppet to voice his actual opinions. This suggested Garrison had some kind of dissociative disorder, using Mr. Hat as an alter ego. Later, Garrison replaced Mr. Hat with Mr. Twig, a twig with googly eyes, though this lasted only briefly before Garrison reconciled with Mr. Hat. The Mr. Hat dynamic was both funny and disturbing. Garrison would have full conversations with the puppet, disagreeing with it, getting angry at it, and treating it like a separate person with its own agency. The other characters mostly accepted this behavior as normal, which is typical for South Park. When Mr. Hat disappeared or was destroyed, Garrison would panic and claim he needed his little friend to function. The codependency between Garrison and his puppet reflected his fractured psychological state. Garrison's sexuality has been a major plot thread throughout the series. He spent early seasons deeply closeted, reacting with horror anytime anyone suggested he might be gay. He overcompensated by trying to be aggressively heterosexual, dating women and talking about his straightness constantly. But his behavior always betrayed him, from his effeminate mannerisms to his clearly repressed desires. The show played this for comedy while also showing how damaging closeted homosexuality and internalized homophobia can be. The death of Mr. Hat coincided with Garrison coming out of the closet. He acknowledged he was gay in Season 4's 4th grade, though he struggled with this realization. He eventually embraced his homosexuality fully, even becoming overly enthusiastic about it, going from denying his orientation to announcing it to everyone he met. This overcorrection was typical Garrison, unable to handle anything in moderation. How when Garrison came out, he entered into a relationship with Mr. Slave, his BDSM practicing partner. Mr. Slave was a leather-clad gay man who served as Garrison's teaching assistant and sexual partner. Their relationship was deliberately provocative, with Garrison and Mr. Slave performing sexual acts in front of students to try to get Garrison fired so he could sue for discrimination. This plot showcased Garrison's willingness to manipulate any situation for personal benefit, even his own sexuality and a relationship. In Season 9's Mr. Garrison's Fancy New Vagina, Garrison underwent a sex change operation and became Janet Garrison, a trans woman. For several seasons, Garrison lived as a woman, dating men, and grappling with her identity. The show used this transformation to explore trans issues, though critics have argued whether the portrayal was satirical commentary or offensive stereotyping. Garrison, as Janet, often acted outrageously, claiming a victim status while behaving terribly, which some read as mocking trans people and others saw as mocking people, fake victimhood. Janet Garrison eventually grew dissatisfied with being a woman and, in Season 12's Eek, a Penis, had a reverse sex change operation, becoming Herbert Garrison again. This detransition was controversial, with some seeing it as the show implying trans identity isn't real or permanent. Garrison's own stated reason was that he realized he didn't want to be a woman. He just wanted people to accept him as he was, which he thought required being a woman, but actually didn't. After detransitioning, Garrison continued teaching and living his life until season 19, when he decided to run for president. His campaign was deliberately outrageous, promising to fuck everyone to death, and espousing inflammatory, xenophobic rhetoric. It was clear from the beginning that Garrison was a stand-in for Donald Trump, who was running for president in real life at the same time. Parker and Stone used Garrison to satirize Trump's campaign, his inflammatory statements, and his unexpected success. When Trump won the actual election, Garrison won in the show, becoming the 45th President of the United States. For seasons 20 through 24, Garrison served as president, with the show using him to comment on Trump's presidency. But there was a twist. Garrison himself was horrified by winning and didn't want the job. He spent much of his presidency trying to get himself removed from office, doing increasingly outrageous things in hopes of being impeached. This was the show's way of suggesting that even Trump himself might not have actually wanted to win. As president, Garrison nuked Canada over personal grievances, tried to deport all Mexicans, and generally acted with complete disregard for the responsibilities of his office. His approval rating plummeted to around 3%, but he remained in power because the show's politics are so dysfunctional that even an obviously unfit president can't be removed. The show used Garrison's presidency to satirize real political events, often producing episodes that commented on things that had happened just days before airing. The pandemic special showed President Garrison actively hindering efforts to fight COVID-19, deliberately allowing it to spread because he saw it as a way to kill Mexicans. This dark turn made Garrison essentially a mass murderer, using a global pandemic for his racist agenda. When scientists tried to develop a vaccine, Garrison destroyed the pangolin they needed and killed the scientist with a flamethrower. Garrison had gone from incompetent teacher to genocidal leader. After losing re-election in the show's version of 2020, Garrison returned to South Park and resumed teaching, appearing in the South Park vaccination special. He was replaced by the actual Donald Trump character in season 27, with the show deciding to use Trump himself rather than the Garrison stand-in for Trump's second term, and this allowed Garrison to return to being just a teacher, though his time as president had clearly changed him. Throughout all these transformations, certain traits remained consistent. Garrison is narcissistic, easily offended, prone to conspiracy theories, and completely self-absorbed. He's racist, shown through Mr. Hat's KKK membership, and his later anti-immigrant policies. He's a terrible teacher who doesn't care about his students' education. And he's psychologically unstable, with his various identity crises suggesting deep-seated mental health issues that have never been addressed. Garrison's relationship with his parents, particularly his father, has been explored in disturbing ways. In Cherokee hair tampons, it's revealed that Garrison resents his father for never molesting him as a child. This twisted logic, where Garrison saw child abuse as a sign of love because he heard about it happening to other kids, suggests profound psychological damage from his upbringing. His father's response to this accusation reveals a family dynamic full of dysfunction and misunderstanding. What makes Garrison interesting is that despite all his flaws and the terrible things he's done, the show sometimes gives him moments of genuine pathos. When he's struggling with his identity, when he's lonely, when he's trying to figure out who he is, there's something almost sympathetic about him. Almost. Then he does something completely awful and reminds you why he's one of the show's antagonists as much as a main character. Garrison's teaching has occasionally shown competence. He's taught the kids about evolution, about Stalin, about various historical events, and when he actually tries, he can be an effective educator. But these moments are rare, overwhelmed by his general incompetence and willingness to use his classroom for personal agendas. He's had the boys help him with his romantic problems, used them in his schemes, and generally treated them as props rather than students he's responsible for. In the video game South Park: The Stick of Truth, Mr. Garrison appears as a character the player interacts with, playing his role as incompetent teacher. In The Fractured But Whole, set during his presidency, Garrison's absence from South Park is explained by his presidential duties. These games reinforce Garrison's role in the South Park universe as someone who's always present but rarely helpful. Herbert Garrison represents the American education system's failures at the complications of identity and self-acceptance, and the dangers of giving power to incompetent, narcissistic leaders. His journey from closeted teacher to president and back shows how American society elevates the wrong people, and how personal identity struggles can manifest in destructive ways. Garrison is tragic and terrible in equal measure, a character who's suffered but also caused tremendous suffering, who's been a victim of prejudice but also a perpetrator of hatred. He's complex, controversial, and utterly essential to South Park's satirical mission. The supporting kids, the extended cast that makes South Park a community, while Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny are the core four. South Park Elementary is filled with kids who've grown from background characters into essential parts of the show's fabric. These supporting characters bring diversity, different perspectives, and new comedic possibilities. They represent the wider community of children navigating the same chaotic world as the main boys, each with their own distinct personalities and roles. Wendy Testerberger is the most prominent girl in the show and one of the most developed female characters. She's been Stan's on-again, off-again girlfriend since the beginning, and she represents something rare in South Park: competent, principled feminism. Wendy is smart, politically active, and willing to fight for what she believes in. She's organized protests, run for class president, and generally shown leadership qualities that put most of the boys to shame. What makes Wendy interesting is that she's not perfect. She's jealous, occasionally petty, and has done questionable things in pursuit of her goals. She beat the crap out of Cartman in Breast Cancer Show Ever, literally beating him bloody after he'd mocked breast cancer patients. While Cartman deserved it, the violence of her response showed Wendy has a dark side. She's also been manipulative in her relationship with Stan, using him for her own purposes and getting frustrated when he doesn't meet her expectations. Token Black, whose name is literally a joke about tokenism, is the wealthy black kid in South Park. In recent seasons, the show revealed his name is actually Tolkien, named after J.R.R. Tolkien, and that everyone had been mispronouncing it as token all along. This meta-joke about tokenism and assumptions became a whole episode, with Stan refusing to believe he'd been wrong about the name for years, and Tolkien lives in one of the nicest houses in South Park, and his wealth often makes him a target for the other kids' envy or Cartman schemes. Tolkien's relationship with his race has been explored in various episodes. He's one of the few black kids in South Park, making him hyper-aware of racial issues. The show has used Tolkien to comment on everything from racial stereotypes to black wealth, to how white guilt manifests. Episodes like With Apologies to Jesse Jackson, where Stan tries to apologize after Randy says the N-word on TV, show Tolkien's frustration with white people thinking they understand racism. His response to Stan's apology, essentially saying Stan will never truly get it, was one of the show's most honest moments about race. Jimmy Valmer and Timmy Birch are the show's disabled characters, and they've been handled in ways that are both progressive and controversial. Jimmy has a speech impediment and uses crutches due to a condition that's never explicitly named. Despite his disability, Jimmy is one of the funniest kids in school, literally. He's a stand-up comedian whose act involves making jokes about his disability and his challenges. His catchphrase, "Wow, what a terrific audience," has become iconic. Jimmy's comedy career has been a major focus of his storylines. He's competed in talent shows, performed at comedy clubs, and even dealt with performance-enhancing drugs when he used steroids to improve his physical capabilities for the Special Olympics. That storyline was typical South Park, using Jimmy's disability to comment on doping in sports, while also showing Jimmy as a complex character capable of making bad choices like anyone else. Timmy Birch has cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair. His limited vocabulary consists mainly of his own name, Timmy, and living a lie, which he shouts frequently. Despite his limited speech, Timmy is shown to have a full inner life and understanding of what's happening around him. He's been the lead singer of a band, participated in the boys' adventures, and generally been treated as an equal by the other kids, even though adults often patronize him. The portrayal of Jimmy and Timmy has been controversial. Some disability advocates appreciate seeing disabled characters who are more than their disabilities, who have personalities and agency. Others argue the show uses their disabilities for cheap laughs and perpetuates stereotypes. The truth is probably somewhere in between. South Park treats Jimmy and Timmy with both dignity and mockery, much like it treats all its characters. Tweek and Craig Tucker have become one of South Park's most important couples. Tweek is a jittery, anxious kid whose parents allegedly gave him coffee as a baby, explaining his constant nervousness. He's paranoid, easily frightened, and prone to panicking about everything from gnomes stealing underpants to North Korea launching nuclear weapons. Craig is his opposite, calm, deadpan, and unemotional. Craig frequently flips people off and responds to problems with either complete indifference or the middle finger, and their relationship began in Season 19's Tweek x Craig, when Asian girls in South Park started shipping them as a romantic couple, drawing yaoi art of them together. To everyone's surprise, including Tweek and Craig's, the relationship actually worked. They started dating and have remained together since, becoming South Park's most stable couple. Their dynamic, with Tweek's anxiety balanced by Craig's steadiness, makes them perfect for each other. The show's portrayal of Tweek and Craig's relationship has been generally positive, showing them as a normal couple who happen to both be boys. They fight, make up, support each other, and deal with the same relationship issues straight couples face. This representation matters because it treats gay relationships as normal, rather than as a joke or a very special episode subject. Tweek and Craig are just two kids who love each other, and that's presented as unremarkable, which is exactly how it should be. Clyde Donovan is the kid who cries easily, often over minor things. He's been shown to be shallow, vain, and not particularly bright, but he's generally harmless. His most notable episode is Reverse Cowgirl, where his mother dies because he left the toilet seat up, leading to a plot about toilet safety and ultimately revealing the Marsh family's address. Clyde's grief over his mother's death was played for both comedy and pathos, showing the show can be surprisingly touching, even while being absurd. Bebe Stevens is the most developed female character after Wendy. She's vain, boy-crazy, and often shallow, representing certain stereotypes about popular girls. But she's also shown depth in episodes focused on her. I like when her developing breasts caused the boys to act like primitive apes, or when she tried to help the girls understand beauty standards. Bebe is complicated by her privileged upbringing and her awareness of her social status. The Goth Kids are a group of non-conformist students who dress in black, smoke cigarettes, and mock everyone else for being conformists. Michael, the leader, delivers cynical monologues about how everything sucks. Henrietta is angry and nihilistic. Pete is tall and tends to agree with Michael. Ferkel is the youngest and most melodramatic. They represent teenage angst taken to its logical extreme, and the show uses them to mock both goth culture and the idea that being nonconformist is somehow more authentic than being mainstream. Our Wendy Testerberger is the most prominent girl in the show and one of the most developed female characters. She's been Stan's on-again, off-again girlfriend since the beginning, and she represents something rare in South Park: competent, principled feminism. Wendy is smart, politically active, and willing to fight for what she believes in. She's organized protests, run for class president, and generally shown leadership qualities that put most of the boys to shame. What makes Wendy interesting is that she's not perfect. She's jealous, occasionally petty, and has done questionable things in pursuit of her goals. She beat the crap out of Cartman in breast cancer show Ever, literally beating him bloody after he'd mocked breast cancer patients. While Cartman deserved it, the violence of her response showed Wendy has a dark side. She's also been manipulative in her relationship with Stan, using him for her own purposes and getting frustrated when he doesn't meet her expectations. Wendy's activism has been a consistent trait throughout the series. She's fought against body shaming in The Hobbit, where she protested against unrealistic beauty standards and the use of Photoshop. She stood up for causes even when it made her unpopular with her peers. Her willingness to be disliked for doing what's right sets her apart from many other characters who cave to peer pressure. This principled stance has made her both admirable and occasionally insufferable, depending on the episode and the cause she's championing. The episode Stupid Spoiled Whore Video Playset showed Wendy at odds with the other girls when they all started emulating Paris Hilton's behavior. Wendy tried to resist the trend, maintaining her self-respect while the other girls became increasingly crude and sexualized. Her eventual breakdown and attempt to conform showed the pressure girls face to fit in, even when fitting in means abandoning your values. The resolution, where she helps defeat Paris Hilton, reinforced that Wendy's instincts about maintaining dignity were correct. Her relationship with Stan has been one of the show's longest-running subplots. They've been together and apart so many times that it's become a running joke. Stan's tendency to throw up whenever Wendy talks to him in the early seasons established their dynamic. He likes her, but can't handle his feelings about her. As they've gotten older, this has evolved into Stan being generally inattentive and Wendy being frustrated by his lack of emotional availability. It's a surprisingly realistic portrayal of how young relationships struggle when partners aren't on the same maturity level. Token Black, whose name is literally a joke about tokenism, is the wealthy black kid in South Park. In recent seasons, the show revealed his name is actually Tolkien, named after J.R.R. Tolkien, and that everyone had been mispronouncing it as token all along. This meta-joke about tokenism and assumptions became a whole episode, with Stan refusing to believe he'd been wrong about the name for years. The episode brilliantly satirized white people's assumptions about black culture, while also mocking the show's own past handling of the character. Tolkien lives in one of the nicest houses in South Park, and his wealth often makes him a target for the other kids' envy or Cartman schemes. Tolkien's relationship with his race has been explored in various episodes. He's one of the few black kids in South Park, making him hyper-aware of racial issues. The show has used Tolkien to comment on everything from racial stereotypes to black wealth, to how white guilt manifests. Episodes like With Apologies to Jesse Jackson, where Stan tries to apologize after Randy says the N-word on TV, show Tolkien's frustration with white people thinking they understand racism. His response to Stan's apology, essentially saying Stan will never truly get it, was one of the show's most honest moments about race. The character has also dealt with stereotypes about black people and their interests. When the kids formed a basketball team and assumed Tolkien would be good at basketball because he's black, his actual incompetence at the sport challenged their assumptions. These moments use Tolkien to expose how even well-meaning people hold prejudiced beliefs based on race. His wealth adds another layer, as he represents black success in a way that contradicts poverty stereotypes, creating cognitive dissonance in other characters who can't reconcile their stereotypes with reality. Jimmy Valmer and Timmy Birch are the show's disabled characters, and they've been handled in ways that are both progressive and controversial. Jimmy has a speech impediment and uses crutches due to a condition that's never explicitly named. Despite his disability, Jimmy is one of the funniest kids in school, literally. He's a stand-up comedian whose act involves making jokes about his disability and his challenges. His catchphrase, "Wow, what a terrific audience," has become iconic, and his commitment to comedy despite the physical challenges he faces makes him one of the show's most determined characters. Jimmy's comedy career has been a major focus of his storylines. He's competed in talent shows, performed at comedy clubs, and even dealt with performance-enhancing drugs when he used steroids to improve his physical capabilities for the Special Olympics. That storyline was typical South Park, using Jimmy's disability to comment on doping in sports, while also showing Jimmy as a complex character capable of making bad choices like anyone else. His struggle with steroid addiction was played seriously, showing the pressure athletes face to enhance their performance and the consequences of taking shortcuts. The Fish Sticks episode, where Jimmy and Cartman wrote a joke together, showcased Jimmy's comedic talent and his frustration with not getting credit for his work. Cartman's attempts to take credit for the joke, which becomes a nationwide sensation, put Jimmy in the position of fighting for recognition of his intellectual property. His anger at being cheated was justified, and his attempts to expose Cartman showed his unwillingness to be walked over despite his disability. Timmy Birch has cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair. His limited vocabulary consists mainly of his own name, Timmy, and living a lie, which he shouts frequently. Despite his limited speech, Timmy is shown to have a full inner life and understanding of what's happening around him. He's been the lead singer of a band called the Lords of the Underworld, participated in the boys' adventures, and generally been treated as an equal by the other kids, even though adults often patronize him. His inclusion in regular activities without his disability being treated as a limitation shows a progressive approach to disability representation. The portrayal of Jimmy and Timmy has been controversial. Some disability advocates appreciate seeing disabled characters who are more than their disabilities, who have personalities and agency, and get to participate fully in their social groups. Others argue the show uses their disabilities for cheap laughs and perpetuates stereotypes, particularly in how Jimmy's speech impediment is sometimes played for humor, or how Timmy's limited vocabulary becomes a running gag. The truth is probably somewhere in between. South Park treats Jimmy and Timmy with both dignity and mockery, and much like it treats all its characters. They're neither saints nor victims. They're just kids dealing with their circumstances. Tweek and Craig Tucker have become one of South Park's most important couples, representing LGBTQ plus youth in a way that's both groundbreaking and characteristically irreverent. Tweek is a jittery, anxious kid whose parents allegedly gave him coffee as a baby, explaining his constant nervousness. He's paranoid, easily frightened, and prone to panicking about everything from gnomes stealing underpants to North Korea launching nuclear weapons. His anxiety disorder, whether caused by excessive caffeine or inherent to his character, makes him one of the show's most sympathetic figures. Craig is Tweek's opposite, calm, deadpan, and unemotional. Craig frequently flips people off and responds to problems with either complete indifference or the middle finger. His famous space program speech, where he explains his dream of leaving Earth because he's sick of everyone, captures his general misanthropy. Craig's flat affect and unwillingness to engage with drama makes him the perfect balance for Tweek's constant anxiety. Their relationship began in season 19's Tweek x Craig, when Asian girls in South Park started shipping them as a romantic couple, drawing yaoi art of them together. The boys initially felt pressured to pretend to be dating to satisfy the shippers, but something unexpected happened. They actually discovered they liked each other. The episode showed them figuring out their feelings in real time and dealing with the confusion of unexpected attraction and the pressure of public expectation. Their decision to actually date rather than just fake it for others showed genuine character development. To everyone's surprise, including Tweek and Craig's, the relationship actually worked. They started dating and have remained together since, becoming South Park's most stable couple. Their dynamic, with Tweek's anxiety balanced by Craig's steadiness, makes them perfect for each other. Craig's deadpan delivery calms Tweek down, while Tweek's emotional expressiveness brings out a gentler side of Craig. Episodes focused on their relationship, like Put It Down, show them working through relationship problems in realistic ways. Communication issues, different approaches to expressing affection, and learning to understand each other's needs. And the show's portrayal of Tweek and Craig's relationship has been generally positive, showing them as a normal couple who happen to both be boys. They fight, make up, support each other, and deal with the same relationship issues straight couples face. This representation matters because it treats gay relationships as normal, rather than as a joke or a very special episode subject. Tweek and Craig are just two kids who love each other, and that's presented as unremarkable, which is exactly how it should be. They attend school dances together, deal with their family's reactions, mostly supportive, and navigate their relationship without it being treated as scandalous or unusual. Clyde Donovan is the kid who cries easily, often over minor things. He's been shown to be shallow, vain, and not particularly bright, but he's generally harmless. In his most notable episode is Reverse Cowgirl, where his mother dies because he left the toilet seat up, leading to a plot about toilet safety and ultimately revealing the Marsh family's address. Clyde's grief over his mother's death was played for both comedy and pathos, showing the show can be surprisingly touching even while being absurd. His character represents the sensitive boy who gets mocked for showing emotion, and his consistent crying has made him both a sympathetic figure and a source of comedy. Clyde's involvement in various schemes, usually following Cartman's lead, shows his easily influenced nature. He goes along with plans without thinking through consequences, making him a useful pawn for more manipulative characters. His vanity, shown when he gets a hot tub and becomes popular with girls, reveals his shallow side. But underneath, Clyde seems to genuinely want to be liked and to fit in, making his mistakes more understandable if not excusable. Bebe Stevens is the most developed female character after Wendy. She's vain, boy-crazy, and often shallow, representing certain stereotypes about popular girls. But she's also shown depth in the episodes focused on her, like when her developing breasts cause the boys to act like primitive apes, reducing themselves to base instincts. That episode used Bebe's experience of puberty to comment on how society treats women's bodies and how boys are socialized to objectify girls. Bebe's awareness of her effect on boys and her willingness to use it showed her understanding of power dynamics, even if she wielded that power in sometimes questionable ways. Her relationship with the other girls, particularly Wendy, and has been explored in episodes about female friendship and rivalry. The girls' group dynamics, with their shifting alliances and complicated social hierarchies, provide commentary on how girls are socialized to compete with each other. Bebe sometimes allies with Wendy against common threats, but at other times positions herself as Wendy's rival, wanting the social status and attention that Wendy gets from being class president or Stan's girlfriend. The Goth Kids are a group of non-conformist students who dress in black, smoke cigarettes, and mock everyone else for being conformists. Michael, the leader, delivers cynical monologues about how everything sucks and how trying to find meaning in life is pointless. Henrietta is angry and nihilistic, and finding reasons to be upset about everything from her parents to society to the other goth kids not being goth enough. Pete is tall and tends to agree with Michael, serving as his second in command. Ferkel is the youngest and most melodramatic, taking the goth philosophy to its logical extreme. They represent teenage angst taken to its logical extreme, and the show uses them to mock both goth culture and the idea that being nonconformist is somehow more authentic than being mainstream. Episodes like The Ungroundable, where they fight against vampire kids who they see as posers, show that even within nonconformist groups there are hierarchies and gatekeeping. The goth kids' insistence on authentic misery and their disdain for anyone who's happy or optimistic makes them both pathetic and somehow admirable for their commitment to their aesthetic. Their appearances, while not frequent, provide commentary on youth culture and the performance of identity. They're aware they're playing roles as goths, but they're also genuinely committed to those roles. This meta-awareness makes them more interesting than simple stereotypes. They know they're outsiders. They've chosen to be outsiders, and they defend their outsider status against anyone who threatens it. These supporting characters have become essential to South Park's world building. They make the school feel populated and real. They provide new perspectives and allow the show to explore topics it can't address through the main four. And they've become beloved by fans, with many people having favorite supporting characters they relate to more than the main cast. The depth and development given to these supposedly minor characters shows South Park's commitment to creating a fully realized world rather than just a vehicle for the main boys' adventures. school staff and authority figures, the adults who should know better. South Park. Elementary's staff consists of some of the most incompetent, damaged, and bizarre adults in the show. These are people entrusted with children's education and safety, and they're almost universally terrible at their jobs. This isn't just a running gag. It's commentary on how education systems fail students by putting the wrong people in charge. From drug-addicted counselors to principals who embody the worst of political correctness, the school staff represents adult failure at every level. Mr. Mackey is the school counselor, recognizable by his large, balloon-like head and his tendency to end every sentence with "mk." He's supposed to help students with their problems, but he's often part of the problem himself. Mr. Mackey has been fired multiple times for incompetence, developed a drug addiction after being falsely accused of drug use, and generally provided terrible advice to students who actually need help. His drugs are bad, "mk" speech has become one of the show's most quotable lines. What makes Mr. Mackey interesting is that despite his incompetence, he occasionally shows genuine care for the students. He's tried to help when kids are dealing with serious issues, even if his help is misguided. His addiction storyline showed him as vulnerable and human, and struggling with demons while trying to maintain his professional role. Mr. Mackey represents the counselors who mean well but lack the skills or resources to actually help the kids who need them most. Principal Victoria was the school's principal for 18 seasons before being fired and replaced by PC Principal. She was generally well-meaning but ineffective, unable to control the chaos in her school, and prone to making decisions that made situations worse. She tried to maintain order but was constantly overwhelmed by the town's insanity and the students' behavior. Her firing came when she refused to go along with PC Principal's agenda, showing that even trying to be reasonable can get you removed if you don't conform to the current orthodoxy. PC Principal arrived in season 19 as the embodiment of militant political correctness. He's a muscular, aggressive man who speaks like a college bro while enforcing strict PC culture on everyone around him. He beats up students and staff who violate PC principles, screens microaggressions with the zealotry of an inquisitor, and runs the school like a dictator. PC Principal was obviously created to satirize the perceived excesses of political correctness and social justice culture on college campuses. What's interesting is how PC Principal has evolved. He started as purely antagonistic, an obvious villain figure. But over time, the show has given him more nuance. He fell in love with Strong Woman, the vice principal, and they had quintuplets together called the PC Babies, who cry whenever they detect something not politically correct. And this domestication of PC Principal made him more sympathetic, while also allowing the show to continue satirizing PC culture through his family life. Chef was one of South Park's most beloved characters for the first 10 seasons. Voiced by Isaac Hayes, Chef was the school cafeteria cook who would sing soul songs and give the boys questionable advice about sex and relationships. He was presented as cool, knowledgeable about romance, and generally one of the few competent adults in town. His song Chocolate Salty Balls became a real-world hit, showing how the character transcended the show itself. Chef's departure from the show came after Hayes, a Scientologist, quit over the episode Trapped in the Closet, which mocked Scientology. The show responded with The Return of Chef, where Chef returns brainwashed by a pedophile cult. The Super Adventure Club, a thinly veiled Scientology reference. The episode killed off Chef in a brutal, shocking way, with him falling off a bridge, getting impaled, burned, and mauled by animals. It was clearly retaliation for Hayes leaving, but it also permanently removed one of the show's most positive influences. Other teachers have appeared sporadically. Mr. Adler, the shop teacher, is depressed over his dead wife and takes it out on his students. Ms. Crabtree was the violent, foul-mouthed bus driver who eventually died off-screen. Ms. Choksandik was a fourth-grade teacher with absurdly saggy breasts who briefly replaced Mr. Garrison before dying mysteriously. Her death played for comedy rather than drama, and the school staff represents adult authority at its most incompetent. These people are supposed to be role models, educators, protectors of children. Instead, they're addicts, perverts, abusers, and idiots. This isn't just South Park being edgy. It's showing how education systems often fail because they're run by people who are themselves broken, undertrained, and unsupported. The kids in South Park have to navigate chaos at school because the adults can't or won't create order. The Broflovsky and McCormick families. Dysfunction. Across the economic spectrum, the families surrounding Kyle and Kenny show how dysfunction exists at every economic level. The Broflovskys are comfortable, educated, and involved in their children's lives, but they're also neurotic, manipulative, and prone to causing disasters through their misguided efforts. And the McCormicks are poor, neglectful, and struggling with addiction, providing an entirely different type of dysfunctional environment. Together, these families show that wealth doesn't determine whether parents will screw up their kids, just how they'll do it. Gerald Broflovsky is a lawyer and Kyle's father. He's generally well-meaning but prone to getting swept up in whatever moral panic is currently gripping South Park. He's been part of angry mobs, supported terrible policies, and generally acted as one of the town's many sheep following the crowd. His most notable storyline came in season 20, when it was revealed he's an internet troll named SkankHunt42, posting horrible comments online while pretending to be outraged by such behavior in his daily life. The troll storyline showed Gerald's dark side. He enjoyed hurting people online and got off on the power of making others miserable, and kept escalating his trolling even when it started causing real-world harm. His wife Sheila's reaction to discovering his trolling, her disappointment and disgust, showed how his behavior betrayed everything his family stood for. Gerald's trolling created international incidents, including tension with Denmark, before he was finally stopped. Sheila Broflovsky is the archetypical overbearing mother. She's loud, opinionated, and convinced she knows what's best for everyone. She's led moral crusades against things she deems harmful to children, most notably in the South Park movie, where she blamed Terrence and Philip for corrupting kids and started a war with Canada over it. Her theme song, Kyle's Mom is a Big Fat Bitch, sung by Cartman, has become one of the show's most memorable musical moments. Sheila's overprotectiveness has caused numerous problems. She can't accept that her children are growing up and will be exposed to things she disapproves of. Her attempts to shield them from reality only make things worse, teaching them that they're fragile and need constant protection. The show uses Sheila to satirize helicopter parenting and the belief that children must be protected from anything potentially offensive or harmful, showing how this approach actually harms kids by preventing them from developing resilience. Ike Broflovsky is Kyle's adopted younger brother from Canada. Despite being very young, he started as a baby and progressed to kindergarten age. Ike has been involved in multiple storylines. The episode Miss Teacher Bangs a Boy dealt with an inappropriate relationship between Ike and his kindergarten teacher. a storyline the show used to comment on how society treats cases of teacher-student misconduct differently based on gender. He's shown signs of being gifted, using advanced language and understanding complex concepts beyond his years. His identity struggles related to being adopted and Canadian have been explored in episodes like It's a Jersey Thing. The relationship between Kyle and Ike is one of the show's sweetest elements. Kyle clearly loves Ike, playing with him, including the kick the baby gag, protecting him, and caring about his well-being. When Kyle found out Ike was adopted, his first concern was that someone might take Ike away. And this genuine brotherly love stands out in a show where most relationships are dysfunctional or toxic. Ike represents the one pure good thing in Kyle's life that hasn't been corrupted yet. The McCormick family represents poverty and neglect in South Park. Stuart and Carol McCormick are often unemployed, alcoholic, and abusive. They fight constantly, sometimes violently, and pay little attention to their children's needs. Kenny and his sister Karen are left to raise themselves, surviving on whatever food they can find and dealing with their parents' dysfunction as best they can. Stuart McCormick has worked various jobs throughout the series, usually losing them quickly due to his poor work ethic or addiction issues. He's been shown to genuinely love his children in brief moments, but he's too consumed by his own problems to be an effective parent. His poverty isn't presented as noble or sympathetic. It's shown as a trap created by bad decisions and lack of opportunities, a cycle that his children are struggling to break. Carol McCormick is similarly neglectful. She's had drug problems, legal issues, and generally been absent even when physically present. The McCormick parents' bedroom is shown to be a place where the kids aren't safe, where violence and neglect are constant. Kenny's orange parka becomes a symbol not just of his character, but of how he has to protect himself from a world where even his home isn't safe. Karen McCormick is Kenny's younger sister, and she's one of the few characters Kenny shows consistent care for. He tries to protect her from their parents, from the poverty they live in, and from the cruelty of other kids. As Mysterion, Kenny's superhero alter ego, one of his main motivations is keeping Karen safe. Her innocence and vulnerability drive Kenny to be heroic, showing that even in the worst circumstances, people can find reasons to be good. The contrast between the Broflovsky and McCormick families shows how class affects childhood in American society. The Broflovskys have money, education, and opportunity, but their children still suffer from their parents' neuroses and manipulations. The McCormicks have none of those advantages, and their children suffer from neglect, abuse, and the endless stress of poverty. Both family situations are bad, just in different ways, showing that screwing up your kids transcends economic boundaries. Our recurring characters, the supporting cast that makes South Park whole. Beyond the school and the main families, South Park has built an entire town's worth of recurring characters. These aren't major players, but they appear often enough that they've become part of the fabric of the show. They provide continuity, running gags, and allow the show to comment on different aspects of society through various perspectives. From mystical creatures to classmates to town eccentrics, these recurring characters make South Park feel like a real, populated place. The goth kids have already been mentioned, but they deserve more focus. Michael, Henrietta, Pete, and Ferkel represent South Park's nonconformist youth. They hang out behind the school smoking, talking about how everything sucks, and mocking anyone who's not goth. Their nihilism and angst are played for laughs, but they also occasionally provide genuine philosophical commentary. Episodes focused on them, like The Ungroundable, where they fight against vampire kids, show they have their own complex social dynamics. Towley is a talking towel who was genetically engineered by the military and now just wants to get high. His constant marijuana use and general uselessness make him both pathetic and hilarious. His catchphrase, "Don't forget to bring a towel," became a real-world reference, and his character parodies the very special message-driven characters kids' shows often feature. Except Towley's message is that he's high and you're a towel. Satan and Saddam Hussein had a relationship that became one of the show's most memorable subplots. Satan, the literal devil, and is portrayed as insecure and sensitive, constantly seeking validation and ending up in abusive relationships. His romance with Saddam Hussein, depicting the Iraqi dictator as a manipulative, sexually aggressive partner, was darkly hilarious. Even after Saddam's death, Satan continued having romantic problems, showing the devil as perhaps the most emotionally vulnerable character in the show. Clyde, Beebe, Token/Tolkien, Craig, Tweek, and the other classmates form an extended friend group that interacts with the main four boys regularly. They've had their own adventures, formed rival groups, and generally populated the school with personalities. Craig's gang, which includes Token, Tweek, and Clyde, serves as a counterpoint to Stan's gang, occasionally cooperating but often in competition. Jesus Christ appears regularly in South Park, are hosting a public access TV show called Jesus and Pals, where he gives advice and occasionally performs miracles. His depiction as a well-meaning but somewhat ineffectual figure trying to spread his message in a world that mostly ignores him is typical South Park satire. He's been in action sequences, had theological debates, and generally been treated as just another member of the community. Big Gay Al is one of South Park's most positive gay characters. He's flamboyantly gay, running an animal sanctuary for gay animals, and generally being kind and accepting of everyone. His episode Big Gay Al's Big Gay Boat Ride was one of the show's earliest attempts to comment on gay rights and acceptance, presenting Al as happy with who he is, and arguing that being gay is perfectly natural. The Woodland Critters are perhaps the show's darkest recurring characters. They appear to be cute woodland animals, but are actually Satan-worshipping monsters who engage in blood orgies and try to bring about the Antichrist. Their contrast between adorable appearance and horrifying behavior makes them genuinely disturbing despite being cartoon animals. They represent how innocence can mask evil, and how things that seem cute and harmless can be anything but. Butter's parents have already been discussed, but they're important enough to mention again. Stephen and Linda Stotch are perhaps the worst parents in South Park, which is saying something. Their abuse of Butters is systematic and psychological, grounding him for everything while maintaining a facade of being good, proper parents, and Stephen's hidden homosexuality and Linda's neurotic overprotection create an environment where Butters can never feel safe or loved. These recurring characters provide depth to South Park's world. They're not just one-off jokes. They're part of the community, returning again and again to participate in the town's chaos. The show has built such a rich cast that episodes can focus on these supporting characters without feeling like filler. They have their own stories, their own arcs, and their own fans, who appreciate seeing them return. Conclusion: why South Park's characters have lasted 27 seasons. We've covered a lot of ground here, talking about South Park's main characters, supporting cast, and the various figures who populate this fictional Colorado town. What makes these characters work, and what makes them endure for over a quarter century, is that they're more than just vehicles for jokes. They've been given depth, development, and the freedom to change in ways most animated characters never get. Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny started as simple archetypes. The everyman, the moral center, the brat, and the kid who dies. But over hundreds of episodes, they've evolved into complex characters with histories, relationships, and genuine emotional arcs. Stan's growing cynicism, Kyle's internal conflicts, Cartman's descent into pure evil, and Kenny's burden of immortality have all been explored with surprising depth for a show that also features talking towels and Christmas poo. Randy Marsh's evolution from background dad to co-protagonist shows how the creator's own aging and changing perspectives have influenced the show. As Parker and Stone got older, they started telling stories about adults navigating the modern world's absurdities, using Randy as their avatar just as they once used Stan and Kyle. The fact that Randy can sustain entire storylines shows how well developed even supporting characters have become. The supporting cast, from Butters to Wendy to Tolkien to all the kids at South Park Elementary, creates a world that feels populated and real. These aren't just background characters. They're individuals with their own personalities, relationships, and roles in the community. The depth given to characters who might only appear occasionally shows the care taken in building this fictional world. And then there are the adult characters, the teachers and parents and town figures who represent adult authority at its most dysfunctional. Mr. Garrison and Mr. Mackey, the various parents, they all show how adults are often just as lost and confused as children, just with more power to cause damage. This deflating of adult authority is central to South Park's worldview. What ties all these characters together is their humanity. Yes, they're crude cartoons in a show that specializes in offensive humor and shock value. But underneath that, they're recognizable as types of people we all know. We know the Cartmans of the world, the bullies who never face consequences. We know the Butters, the innocent souls who get taken advantage of. We know the Randys, the adults having midlife crises that affect everyone around them. South Park's characters have lasted because they tap into something true about American culture and human nature. They show us ourselves, both the good and the terrible, without the filters and politeness that usually obscure reality. The show's willingness to change its characters, to let them grow and evolve and sometimes become completely different people, keeps things fresh even after 27 seasons. Whether you love South Park or hate it, whether you think it's brilliant satire or juvenile garbage, you can't deny the impact these characters have had. Cartman has become a cultural shorthand for entitled evil. "They killed Kenny" is instantly recognizable worldwide. Randy's various catchphrases have entered common usage. These characters have transcended their show to become part of our shared cultural language. As we wrap up this comprehensive look at South Park's characters, the main takeaway is this: these aren't just cartoon characters designed to make us laugh, though they do that extremely well. They're carefully crafted creations that have been given room to grow, change, and stay relevant across decades of cultural shifts. From the core 4 boys to the sprawling cast of supporting characters, South Park has built one of the most detailed, memorable casts in television history. And look, if you've stuck with us through this entire deep dive into South Park's characters, you clearly appreciate detailed analysis of animation. That's exactly what we do here at the Cartoon Codex. We break down the shows you love, examining their characters, their themes, and what makes them work. So do me a favor. hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like if you found it helpful or interesting. And let me know in the comments which South Park character is your favorite and why. Whether it's one of the main four, a supporting character, or some random background figure who's only appeared in 3 episodes. I want to hear about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.